one of the biggest fears that I have right now is being mediocre. Man, I don't want to be a mediocre husband. When God gives me the opportunity of being a father, I don't want to be a mediocre father. I don't want to be a mediocre leader, mediocre pastor. And I have realized that the best version of myself comes to light when I'm resting on Jesus. That the best version of Manny the pastor comes alive when I'm anchored in Jesus. That the best version of Manny the husband comes alive when I'm anchored in Jesus, when I depend on him fully, completely. When I become the best friend that I can be to my friends, when I'm anchored in Jesus. Growing up in Cuba sucked in many ways, and there's a number of issues that you go through growing up in Cuba as a Christian, and the whole political shebang that goes with communism and everything that it represents. But one thing that being in that constant state the whole time helped to create is resiliency. And you become resilient. Like, you go through difficult times, and the mindset is, we're gonna get through this. We're gonna get through this, and you're constantly going through this. Now, you add to that the faith factor. And it goes from, we need to get through this, through God is gonna get us through this. And it changes everything. Because it doesn't remove responsibility completely. But at the same time, you know that even if everything fails in this world, there is a promise of something beyond that it will be okay. But I cannot tell you that I wasn't afraid. There was a moment in my life that and I can almost pinpoint it. I used to say this a lot to my friends. I was like, I came to the United States to be an American, and there was a level of like, I'm gonna leave behind a lot of my culture. I'm gonna leave behind a lot of things that make me, or that have made me. A lot of that was resentment also towards my culture as a Cuban. I know there's some Cubans watching that probably want to hang me, but it is what it is. But I was afraid. I was afraid not to fit in. I was afraid to not make it. Dude, there is, like, as immigrants, there's an incredible amount of pressure that comes from our parents. My dad, very well-meaning, and by the way, I love my dad. My dad is one of my role models. I tell him all the time that if I ever become like half a man he is, I'll be all right. But my dad will be like, hey, listen, and part of that is trying to motivate a high school student, like, we sacrifice all of this, for you to step up. Your family's way out, and there's the expectations of that. And then you're dealing with your own mess, and sometimes you don't feel comfortable enough to verbalize to anyone because you wonder if everybody else going through the same things that I'm going through, which the answer is yes, probably. But you don't know that because nobody's talking about it. So there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear of not measuring up to my dad's expectations, to my family's expectations, because how much I respected them. There was fear of not finding what is it that God wanted me to do. I knew that I wanted him to do. I wanted to do whatever he wanted me to do, but I didn't know how do I get there? Like, who's gonna tell me? Is it gonna be like a dove from heaven? Like, is it gonna be like I'm gonna get a letter from Jesus? How is this gonna play out? So there was fear. There was a lot of fear in those areas. But when the rubber met the ground, I just had this assurance that God was gonna get us through it. Now, here's the crazy thing. It didn't happen as fast as I wanted it to happen. We struggled, man. Like, we struggled. We lived in a small apartment for a long time where I slept in the kitchen. And sleeping in the kitchen has its perks. Like, the fact that you can just open the fridge in the middle of the night, grab whatever is in there, like, it has its perks, I'm not gonna lie. Like, now the pop-up bed was a little uncomfortable per se, but we lived in a small place. My mom worked, my dad worked, I worked. We had a debt to pay of how much it had cost to bring us illegally to this country, Like, there was a lot of moving pieces. I started school. I graduated from high school and I ended up going to university. I got my associates in opticianry. I felt that I wanted to be an ophthalmologist. This is the way that God is going to take us. That ended up not being the right direction. I started dating someone. I was like, man, this is for sure the person that God has for me. And I realized that wasn't it, and the next person wasn't it either. Like, there were some mistakes that needed to be made, because in every single one of those seasons, I learned something about God that was going to prepare me a little better for the next season and what God wanted to. Now, were some of those mistakes, you can say, almost deliberate? Like, was that a little bit of rebellion on my part? Absolutely, yeah, there was some of that. But even in that, God uses those things to be like, hey man, I got you. I know where you are, but here's what I want to take you. Here's what I want to do with you. And dude, that still happens to me. Like, I feel like we're never out of that loop. I'm always struggling with trusting myself and trusting God. And there's nothing, especially now, there's nothing I pursue more that God's will for my life. I want to have that, but that's never without fear. That's never without fear.